Hey everyone, welcome back to D&D Daily English. Today is April 18th, 2026. I'm Dan.
And I'm Daphne. You are listening to D&D Daily English, the podcast where we help you learn English through real-world news. Today's story is very exciting. It is about oil, stock markets, and a very important place called the Strait of Hormuz. Let's get started.
Okay, so here is the big headline for today. Iran has reopened the Strait of Hormuz. That is Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. And because of this news, two very big things happened. First, oil prices dropped sharply. Second, stock markets around the world went up strongly. Let me explain why this matters so much. The Strait of Hormuz is a very narrow body of water. It sits between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. And here is the key fact. About 20% of the world's oil passes through this strait every single day. That is 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil in the entire world. So when this strait is closed or blocked, oil supply gets very tight. And when oil supply is tight, prices go up. But now that the strait is open again, the market is saying, okay, oil will flow normally. So prices dropped. That is basic supply and demand logic.
That is a wonderful explanation, Dan. And I would like to add some cultural and global context here. You see, the Strait of Hormuz is not just important for oil, it is a symbol of geopolitical tension. The word geopolitical means the relationship between geography, which is physical location, and politics, which is how countries interact with each other. When Iran controls or blocks this strait, it sends a very strong message to the entire world. It says, we have power over your energy supply. So when Iran reopened the strait, it was not just an economic decision, it was also a diplomatic signal. It told the world that the worst part of the US-Iran conflict may be over, and markets, as Dan will tell us, responded very quickly to that signal.
Exactly right, Daphne. Let me now walk through the actual numbers, because the data here is really impressive. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, which we often just call the Dow, went up 868 points. That is a gain of 1.79%. The S&P 500 went up 84 points, or 1.2%. The Nasdaq, which is focused on technology companies, went up 365 points, or 1.52%. And the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, which tracks chip companies, went up 226 points, or 2.43%. Now, why did semiconductor stocks go up so much? Because chip companies like TSMC, which is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, are deeply connected to the AI industry. And when geopolitical risk goes down, investors feel more confident putting money into high-growth technology sectors. That is a classic risk-on behavior in financial markets.
Now let us talk about Taiwan specifically, because the Taiwan stock market also had a very strong reaction. The Taiwan Futures Index, which is called Taizhi in Chinese, rose by 664 points after hours. That is a gain of 1.79%, closing at 37,742 points. And earlier in the week, on April 16th, the Taiwan Stock Exchange actually broke above 37,000 points for the very first time in history. That is a historic milestone. Now, there were two main reasons for this. One was the easing of US-Iran tensions. The second was TSMC's earnings call, which is called a fa shuhui in Chinese. TSMC gave investors a very positive outlook. They said demand for AI chips is growing very, very fast. And because TSMC makes the most advanced chips in the world, this news made investors very happy.
I want to zoom in on the foreign investor behavior here, because this is a really important part of the story. Earlier in the conflict, foreign investors sold more than 1 trillion new Taiwan dollars worth of Taiwan stocks. That is an enormous amount of selling. The technical term for this is net selling, or sell-off. But starting from early April, foreign investors began to buy back those stocks. This process is called a rebound or a buyback. Investment advisors in Taiwan are now saying that next week we may see what is called a kai ho cho, which means a wave of foreign investors returning to the market and buying stocks again. This kind of capital inflow is very healthy for any stock market. It brings liquidity, it brings confidence, and it pushes prices higher.
And there is one more very important connection that I want to highlight. If oil prices continue to fall, what happens next? Well, lower oil prices mean lower energy costs. Lower energy costs mean businesses spend less money. When businesses spend less money, inflation goes down. And when inflation goes down, the US Federal Reserve, which we call the Fed, is more likely to cut interest rates. A rate cut means borrowing money becomes cheaper. Cheaper money means more investment. More investment means stock markets go up even more. So you see, it is a beautiful chain reaction. One event, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, can trigger a whole series of positive economic outcomes around the world. This is what economists call a macro tailwind.
Daphne, I totally agree with you on the inflation and Fed connection. But I do want to push back a little bit on the optimism here. Yes, the Strait is open again. Yes, markets are celebrating. But the underlying US-Iran disagreement has not been resolved. There is still no formal ceasefire agreement, so my concern is that this market rally might be premature. What if tensions flare up again next week?
That is a fair and very thoughtful concern, Dan. I think you are right that the political situation is still fragile. The word fragile means easily broken. However, I would argue that markets are forward-looking. They price in expectations, not just current reality. And right now the expectation is that the worst is over. Even the investment advisors in the article said, the market generally believes the worst-case scenario has passed.
Right, but expectations can change very fast. Remember, just a few weeks ago, foreign investors sold over 1 trillion new Taiwan dollars of Taiwan stocks. That happened very quickly. So my point is, investors should be cautiously optimistic. Enjoy the rally, but do not ignore the tail risk. Tail risk means the small but real possibility of a very bad outcome.
I completely agree with that balanced view. Markets can be emotional and irrational in the short term. So yes, cautious optimism is probably the wisest approach here. Watch the ceasefire negotiations closely. If a formal agreement is reached, that would be a much stronger signal for sustained market growth. Until then, as you said, enjoy the rally but stay alert.
Perfectly said. Okay, now let's move into the English lesson section. Daphne, I know you have picked 3 great vocabulary words for us today.
Yes, I have. And today's 3 words all come directly from our news story. They are words that appear very often in financial and international news, so they are very useful to learn. Let us go through them one by one, nice and slowly. The first word is geopolitical. Say it with me slowly. Geopolitical. Geopolitical. This word has 2 parts. The first part, geo, comes from the Greek word meaning earth or land. The second part, political, means related to government or power. So geopolitical means related to how geography and physical location affect political power and international relationships. For example, we can say, the Strait of Hormuz has enormous geopolitical importance because it controls oil supply for the whole world. Another example, many companies are now thinking carefully about geopolitical risk before they decide where to build their factories. This is a very common word in international business news, so please remember it. The second word is inflation. Say it slowly with me. Inflation. Inflation. This word comes from the Latin word inflare, which means to blow up or to expand. Inflation means the general rise in prices over time. When there is inflation, your money buys less than before. For example, high oil prices often cause inflation because energy costs affect the price of almost everything. Another example, The central bank raised interest rates to fight inflation and protect the value of people's savings. This is one of the most important words in economics, and you will hear it almost every day in financial news. The third and final word for today is semiconductor. Say it slowly. Semi-con-duc-tor. Semiconductor. This word also has two parts. Semi means half or partial. Conductor means something that carries electricity. So a semiconductor is a material that can sometimes carry electricity and sometimes not. This special property makes it perfect for building computer chips. For example, TSMC is the world's most advanced semiconductor manufacturer. Another example, the global semiconductor shortage in 2021 caused serious problems for the car industry and the electronics industry. This word is extremely important if you follow technology or financial news, because semiconductors are at the heart of the AI revolution happening right now.
Those were 3 excellent words, Daphne. Geopolitical, inflation, and semiconductor. Let me quickly summarize today's main story for everyone. Iran reopened the Strait of Hormuz. This caused oil prices to fall sharply. Stock markets in the United States and Taiwan reacted very positively. The Dow Jones went up 868 points. The Taiwan Futures Index went up 664 points after hours. TSMC's positive earnings outlook and strong AI demand also helped push Taiwan stocks higher. Foreign investors are expected to return to the Taiwan market next week. And if oil prices keep falling, inflation may decrease, which could lead to U.S. interest rate cuts later this year. That would be very good news for global stock markets.
Beautifully summarized, Dan. And remember, today's 3 key vocabulary words were geopolitical, inflation, and semiconductor. Try to use these words in a sentence today. Practice is the best way to make new words stick in your memory. Learning English through real news is one of the most powerful methods available to you, because you are learning language and knowledge at the same time.
That is so true. All right, everyone, that is all for today's episode of D&D Daily English. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps other learners find our channel. And if you are not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a new episode. We release new content every single day, covering the most important news stories from around the world.
And if you have any questions about today's vocabulary or grammar, please leave a comment below. Dan and I read every single comment, and we love hearing from our listeners. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. Keep learning, keep growing, and we will see you tomorrow on D&D Daily English. Goodbye, everyone.
See you next time. Take care.